Hey guys, it's Bruce. Welcome to ConvoCourses podcast, and we're going to be continuing on with our series of going through CompTIA SecAI. Hold up, let me start everything off here. Okay, we're on TikTok, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, and I think LinkedIn too. All right, hopefully it works. Okay, so as usual, what we'll do is we're going to cover about the first 20 minutes is going to be just straight up going through the SecAI Plus. If you guys didn't know, CompTIA has a security for AI certification that they just released as of a couple months ago at the time of this recording. And I found it to be very useful. I took the test about last month, 2 months ago, a month and a half ago. And I found it to be extremely helpful to my current position where I'm actually doing some of this stuff. And the way that they make it vendor neutral, the way that they cover somewhere in between technical and conceptual, I think is excellent. So I would highly recommend that you do it, especially if you're already in a GRC position, you're in an IT position. I think that this is the direction that everything's going to go with AI. I don't think that there's any turning around, regardless of what you may think about it. It's not going to go anywhere. It's just too useful. Are there better, smarter things we can do with it? Yes. But my thinking on this whole thing is that we do better by learning as much of it as possible so we can stay ahead of the game, especially if you happen to be in this career field. All right, so let's get into it. And like I said, we'll go 20 minutes in this, and then I'll start taking comments and questions and stuff. I see people popping in here, and we'll definitely take questions. I'll stick around for some time because this part won't take much longer. We're almost completely through domain 2. And let's go ahead and start this sucker off right now. All right. And we're going to go ahead and maximize the screen here. All right, so what we're going to be talking about in this one, and we're going to be sticking with domain 2, but it's going to be 2.4 through 2.6. And there's not as much information in here, and you'll find some of it covers it builds on the foundational stuff that we were talking about before. And the main two topics are data security controls and attack analysis. So it's taking the stuff that we learned. We're going through OWASP vulnerabilities and the attack framework, and it's putting it more in context of what you got to do, what you're going to do with it, what controls do you use. You're mapping the controls to specific features of AI and vulnerabilities in AI. So let's get into it. Starting off with data security controls for AI. And what they're going to do in the test, just so you know, is it's going to be a lot of scenario-based questions. They're going to give you different scenarios, like you happen to be at this organization and you have this vulnerability, and what type of security controls will you use for this? So this is actually a critical, one of the most impactful pieces of domain 2. And starting off with basic cybersecurity stuff. And that's data at rest, protecting data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. And I'll explain this more. You'll see how this, especially if you're around computers a lot, you use a lot of computers, you're online a lot, especially at your job, you'll see right away what I'm talking about here. So data in transition. We need to encrypt data in all states. Now, this is not just for AI, but it's for across the board, whether you're working with databases, if you're doing network engineering, whatever you happen to be doing, we need encryption when the data is in transit, going from point A to point B, when the data is at rest, meaning it's stored on your local hard drive, or it's in use, it's actually being processed. And I'm going to explain each one of these and the things that you need to look for the purposes of AI, SecAI. So let's start off with in transition. What does that mean? So it means we're going to need to protect the data when it's moving, for example, from your computer, my data going to you, or you sending out an email, or you going to a website. You're using packets going back and forth on your browser to go to a server. And the key words here are going to be things like TLS, encrypting API, HTTPS. These are all terms I'm sure you've heard of, certificates. These are things that you've probably heard of if you have been in IT in any way, shape, or form, you've heard about encrypting traffic. If you're using your bank, you're going to have to encrypt the data going to using HTTPS, and you understand that there's some sort of encryption that's going to happen in between your browser, your phone, to your bank's servers. That is data in transit being encrypted, and AI uses this. This is very important to the use of AI because AI uses a lot of API and data going back and forth to and from cloud instances or to over your network and all that kind of stuff. So data in transit, this will be a part of, they will ask questions about one of these, one or all of them. Data at rest. Now, this is one I think most people can understand this one straight away because it's data encrypted on your actual hard drive. This is if you hear things like AES 256 or BitLocker or people who have iPhone. If you have an iPhone, they have a way to encrypt the data. Really, any phone these days, you can encrypt the data directly on your hard drive. So if somebody picks it up, it's useless to them unless they have the PIN code to get into your phone, right? That's encryption of data at rest. And this is really important for AI because AI is, a lot of its data is data at rest, like the weights and the way that it's processing all the information, all that is sitting on a hard drive or on a database. It's on a file structure that needs to be encrypted, especially if you have important data, right? So data in use. Now, this one is not talked about as much. This is normally used, like you're popping to be in the DoD or you're in a space where they're using a lot of encryption, like they have really important data. They're literally going to encrypt the data as it's being processed. So as the data is going through your CPU and it's crunching numbers or whatever, doing word processing, it's literally encrypted as it's doing all of that. And one term you want to hold on to is called homomorphic encryption. It's where the compute on encrypted data without decrypting and while you're doing all the processing. And this one I remember seeing on the test. That this right here is something is not something that you talk about, but this, if you hear that, this means you're encrypting the data while it's in use. And it's normally used in highly regulated environments. Financial sector will be familiar with these terms. The healthcare industry might be, and of course, the military and intelligence, they might be. Anywhere where there's highly regulated places where they're protecting very sensitive information, this might be something in use. But what you want to understand from this, if nothing else, is that there's a difference between in transit, that's your HTTPS, at rest, data at rest, encrypted on your hard drive in storage, AES 256, or there's other types of encryption methods as well. And then, of course, data in use, homomorphic encryption. That's data being encrypted while it's in compute mode. Okay, so another thing that you'll need to be familiar with as far as controls on AI and protecting vulnerabilities on AI infrastructure or AI enabled systems is data safety. There's 5 different things that you're going to have to be familiar with and be able to, you just need to learn. We don't have to go super deep into this. What you need to know is the terminology and how it's different, how they differ. Starting off with the first one, anonymization. So I think this one's pretty straightforward. Most people understand what this means, but let's get a little bit more specific about it. This is permanently removing all identifying information. That means that we might not even take your information to begin with for our training model. We might not even take maybe all we need to know from a hospital's perspective is the patient's diagnosis, maybe the age of the individual, demographic, and then we need to know the prognosis, like what is happening with the person. We don't need, and in this example here that explains like a hospital trains on disease and the patient's name, social security number, date of birth. We don't need any of that. So all that data is anonymized. We don't take it at all, or it's deleted. Maybe we took it, but it's completely removed so that there's no identifying information. And there's certain compliance frameworks such as GDPR where that's a requirement in some cases. So there's anonymization. So let's go move on to masking. So masking, what is this? So this is replacing, like we took on, let's say we're that same hospital and we're looking for cures to diseases, right? And we need to train our model on how to do this. So we have to take patient information who have these issues, right? So we take in their information. We have all kinds of protected PII, protected information in there, right? They're personally identifiable information. And we might just do data masking on that information. For some reason, let's say that we need the information because for formatting purposes. And so what we might do is replace the sensitive values with realistic looking substitutions that preserve that data's format. You might need that format for different reasons. One of them, off the top of my head, if you were designing, if you had a medical device that you were testing the medical device to receive the information and then send it to and it interacted with an AI model, right? And then you're actually writing and creating the medical device's software. And so you need the format of a person's social security number because it's designed to take the social security number and the patient information and all that kind of stuff. But maybe when you, as a IT company, ship out this software, you don't want that same training data to have people's real information that you trained on with. So you might mask that information. So that's just one crude example of why you might have data masking. But the difference between data masking and anonymization is that anonymization of the information is permanent. You can't get that information back. Data masking, you might have a PIN code that removes the data because you need it, or it's keeping the formatting of it. So you're actually keeping some portion of the data with data masking. Now, let's go to data redaction. And I'm purposely moving through all of these so that you can have a very clear distinction between these three things, because they might want to mix them up on the test. So data redaction is, I think most people know what this one is. It's like you've got the data in there and you're removing specific sensitive fields from the data before it reaches the model. So in this case, unlike masking, where we have all the fields, but we've just masked or put pseudo information in there to cover the real information, data redaction is just taking all the sensitive fields out. So it might only cover the SSN, for example, and it's just redacting that bit of information, but it's keeping everything else, the name, the phone number, the demographics, and all that kind of stuff, right? And then data minimization. So what is this? This is where we're only collecting what we need to do to process so that the AI model can train. So we don't need the social security number, but we do need let's say the name, the demographic, the age of the patient, and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to minimize the information. We don't need their phone number. We're not reaching out to them. We don't need maybe we don't need their place of birth or something like that. We're going to minimize what we're going to take from them to minimize the potential impact of taking all that information and it being exposed. And the last thing on here, I think really stands out from everything else, is data classification labels. This one right here, I'm literally dealing with this at my job right now. This one's wild. So data classification is tagging data items with sensitive labels such as public, internal, confidential, restricted, and the AI systems enforce access based on labels and prevent a model from mixing sensitive labels up. And you might also restrict what the AI model can see. If you have very sensitive information, maybe you don't want the AI to even see that stuff at all. So data classification is very important when you're dealing with AI systems in a professional environment such as banking or healthcare or retail or whatever, right? So just a quick demonstration of each one of these, just so you don't mix them up. You've got data anonymization here, and you can see it's just blanking out the entire name and maybe all PII. And all we need is the diagnosis before we see the name and all that kind of stuff. But then we go through anonymization and we just delete and remove all those names because we don't need that stuff. And then data redaction, like we said, it's like the difference between data redaction and masking is that masking might have most of the SSN, but it masks the first six letters of the SSN, whereas redaction would take out the entire field in all columns for SSN entirely. And then you've got another example of masking where it's just masking a portion of a registration or a portion of the email address or whatever. And the reason why this is important to the test is that what they'll do is what they want to know is if you understand it enough to know why you would use each one of these. Why would you use minimization as opposed to anonymization? And just think to yourself, what scenarios would you be in where you can't use anonymization, right? Like in my example, if you had a software or your AI absolutely needed the format of a social security number and the format of date of birth, and that format was important because it had to integrate with the hospital's Epic software or whatever, you can't really anonymize certain information because you need the actual formatting. So what you might need to go with is masking. So masking gets some of that work done. Now you have a little bit more risk. And what I like about this graphic here is it's going from risky to not as risky. Anonymization, if you can delete all that personally identifiable information, what can an attacker use if you have anonymized all the data, as opposed to you've taken some of the patient's information, but not all of it. You didn't collect all of it. All right, so let's move on to objective 2.6. This is attack analysis and compensating controls. A lot of the questions on the test, just so you know, without giving you my test, right? Remember, they don't give the same test out to everybody, but a lot of mine, I recall, had to do with me matching, knowing what kinds of attacks and then what kind of controls will mute that attack or limit or control and reduce the risk of that attack. So that's what we're going to get into next. So you might have 22 types of attacks and 8 compensating controls, and your job is to match what attacks to control. What controls go with what attacks. So what we're going to do is an overview. And really, to be honest with you guys, we've covered a lot of this stuff. So we're not going to go super deep in these. On the previous videos, we covered things like input attacks with the prompt injections. We covered poison attacks with data poisoning, model poisoning with the OWASP, top 10 LLM and top 10 ML, data extraction attacks with model inversion and model theft, and membership in inference. Those are important. And then integrity attacks, output integrity, model skewing, availability attacks, such as denial of service of the model, and design flaws. We covered some, in some way, shape, or form, these in our previous videos. But what we're going to do now is focus on matching some of the most prominent ones with different controls that will minimize or even eliminate or avoid some of these types of attacks. And the scenarios you'll be given will be a lot of this type of things. The scenario where you have this kind of attack, what kind of control would you use? And then you have 4 different options for that, right? So let's start off with a couple of popular ones. Prompt injection. So prompt injection is an attacker embeds instructions inside of a user input or external data that overrides the model's system prompt and can cause it to act against its intended purpose. Now, how would you go about fixing this? You might do what's called a prompt firewall, where the input is restricted. You might also do a prompt template, where you don't allow free form people just put whatever they want inside of that model, inside of their prompts. So another one is input sanitization, where it actually looks at all the input as it's going in before it gives it to the model to act on. So those are controls that's a very straightforward way to fix that. What you really want to remember here is prompt firewalls. That one's going to be important to you. Jailbreaking. So jailbreaking is, I notice it's not as popular as it was when LLMs start hitting. This one was very popular. It's still being done for sure, but it's not as easy as it used to be. So what is it? It is where, for AI's purpose of AI, is social engineering the model through role play, hypothetical framing, persona switching, to bypass the safety training. So one of the ones that's popular on Reddit, I remember, that got big was Dan mode, where you would trick the AI into removing some of the restrictions that it has. It's not allowed to talk about certain things like making dangerous chemicals or dangerous devices. It can do it. It has the capability of doing it, but ChatGPT and Anthropic have wisely restricted those things. But there's a way around it. And one of those was Dan mode, where they tricked it into, they'll make a movie plot and then say, give me a realistic way of making this improvised device that is going to be harmful. You know what I'm saying? That I can't say without getting banned on here or something. So anyway, how would you block against jailbreaks? One of the ways is model guardrails. You'll see this one quite a bit. This is something you really need to know. So you might do a model guardrail where you're telling the model, listen, you need to look out for this. You might see this thing right here. So model guardrails with adversarial testing. Another one is multi-turn conversation monitoring, where you're monitoring the actual conversations. Another one would be human review triggers, especially if you're dealing with something like insurance claims or something like that, and somebody's trying to jailbreak and let's say they try to jailbreak it and try to get a claim for hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. You might have a human in the loop on that, because if it's over a certain amount of money, the human has to approve that and review the claim. So input manipulation. What is that? What is this type of attack? And then we'll go into the control. So this type of attack is crafting inputs with subtle perturbations or changes, modifications, tiny little modifications that cause systematic misclassification. So somebody is literally manipulating and trying to convince or hypnotize the model to think in a different way. It's things are up, but they're down, or down, but that they're up. They're trying to manipulate it. So they're trying to manipulate it to where it's giving out different information than it's supposed to, wrong information, skewed information for whatever purpose. And so how do we fix this? How do we fix somebody trying to do input manipulation? So we can do adversarial training, again, adversarial training on the model so that it is ready for this kind of thing. We might actually prep it so that we give it these types of things and tell it, look out for this because you might see this. We train it to where it finds that kind of stuff and is able to identify that pattern of behavior that a user might try to use. So those are some of the types of controls that match to the types of attack. And for the purposes of the test, that's the type of mindset you want to be in. It's like, okay, I know what types of attacks there are on AI, on this or that type of AI, and I know what types of controls I can use to reduce the risk of those attacks or even avoid certain attacks. So poison attacks are a slow burn. The damage is done before the model goes live. That's another thing to remember is they'll hit you with all these different types of attacks. And one thing, like looking back on it, I realized that if you just understand how models are trained, so models have to be trained and then before they're deployed, right? And then there's different attacks for when they're trained versus when they're actually deployed and even when they're fine-tuned. So there's you can attack it at different stages. And if you understand the stages that a model goes through, from them gathering the initial data, training data, or creating this training data that's going to be used to train the model, right? It's like you have to know the whole life cycle of the model itself. That's going to help you out quite a bit with this test. So you need to know that there is a process where you're gathering the appropriate data training data. That model gets trained on that, and then it gets fine-tuned, and then it gets deployed. And at every stage of this, there can be attacks, and you have to know what types of attacks at each stage, what are the stages, of course, and then what kinds of controls to put in place for each one of those stages. All right, so let's get into more about the attacks and the types of controls you can put into place. And we'll just keep this high level, and I'm going to stick with keywords you need to know. So poison attacks is corrupting how the model learns. And remember, we talked about the different types of stages a model goes through. Very important. Very important. If you understand that, you'll be able to guess your way through a lot of the questions. Okay, so let's get into this. Data poisoning. So an attacker injects malicious samples into the training data before training. So this is in the section where they're gathering the actual training model. It hasn't even started training yet, and somebody goes in there and poisons the well, poisons the source. And then that data ends up corrupting the actual model itself because it's training on bad data. So how do we protect against this? Data provenance tracking. Provenance means making sure that the data that we're pulling from is a authoritative, true source. We're not gathering data from just anywhere and then pumping it into our model. A great example of how this went super, super wrong is where, what was that model? Grok. So Grok started pulling directly from Twitter, and then they took off all the filters and just let it say whatever it wanted, and it turned into Mecha Hitler. So the model is only going to be as good as the actual data that is pulling from. So that's just one example. A poor example because it was beyond training at that point. So probably model poisoning might be a better one. So model poisoning, what is that? An attacker with direct access to the model artifacts modifies the weights and the parameters directly without retraining and requires privileged access to the model. So this is like an insider threat. Somebody has some access to the model, direct access to the model's weights and how it is going to perceive the world, and then they start messing around with it. And so the control mechanism for this is access controls. This is a very common idea. It's one of the main best practices for us cybersecurity practitioners is something called access control. And you need to have access control to the actual model registry, to the data, to the training behavior, to all that kind of stuff. Another thing you might do is have logging. Anybody who gets access to it, we're tracking everybody who has access to this thing. So let's move on to backdoor and Trojan attacks. So what is this? So I'm sure you're familiar with Trojans and backdoor attacks and stuff, but in the context of models, what does it mean? It's a hidden switch embedded in model via poisoned training. Model behavior it behaves normally until a specific trigger input activates the backdoor, causing targeted misbehavior. It reminds me of that movie Coming Back. Every time I go into this one and for the models, I always think about that scene in Star Wars where they're creating all of the clones that are going to go to war, and then they put into the clones Order 66. So the clones act totally normal before this. They're normal soldiers. They're doing their duty. They're following orders. And then as soon as they initiate Order 66, something pops and they kill all the Jedi. So this is because somebody put a Trojan into those clones. And it's the same thing with models. You can do the same thing. You can have a sleeper cell inside of the models it acts normal. It answers questions, no problems. And then you do an Order 66 and then suddenly it's burning the house down. So how do we protect against this for models? Trigger detection testing. That's one thing. We can do some testing to figure out if there's any triggers in there. Adversarial evaluation before deployment and model provenance. Only use models from verified sources. And I would argue another thing you can do is, of course, make sure that only approved people have access to the model as well, because we want to make sure that nobody's in poisoning it before it even happens, before it's even gone live. Transfer learning attack. So this is where an attacker poisons the public foundational model, knowing that the downstream developers will fine tune on it. So they'll go out onto a known place where people download models from. And Hugging Face is a great example. So Hugging Face has a whole bunch of models, and it's awesome. If you've never been on Hugging Face before, you got to go check it out. It's incredible. So it's like a big app store for models that you can download, and all these different things you can from all the people all over the world are there. But unfortunately, it's also got a whole bunch of poisoned models, and one of those came from a security organization called mithril security. So they modified a instance of GPT, made it look like a regular known GPT that people were downloading, and then they poisoned it. They messed around with the weights and put disinformation in there, and they uploaded it, this very near identical model to a known Hugging Face model, and just to see what would happen. And people downloaded it. People start downloading it and using it and not knowing it's completely poisoned and is going to give you a bunch of disinformation. So how do you avoid this? What can you do? You can verify model provenance. We keep coming back to that word provenance. Provenance is very important. Data provenance is making sure the source that we're using it from is legit. We can't just believe everything we see. We've got to validate everything, especially in this day and age in AI. You got to validate every bit of information and every bit of code that you get, because you just never know. Sometimes it looks completely real, but you've got to do your own homework. And that's where data provenance comes in. What are the sources that I'm pulling from? Are these validated sources? Am I pulling it from the actual source, or am I pulling it from somebody who looks like this but is a little bit cheaper? Be careful about what you download and what you use, and think about what you're using, especially for the data that goes into these models and the models themselves in this case. So that's one of the things you're going to do. Introducing biases. Now, this is another thing you might see on the test. What is this? Deliberately introducing biased training data to cause the model to make systematically unfair decisions, discriminating against groups, favoring specific outcomes. This does happen. This is a real thing. So in 2023, a real thing that occurred was that researchers demonstrated that hiring AI models trained on historical data that included gender bias job postings consistently ranked male candidates higher for technical roles, even after attempts to remove explicit gender markers. So this is a real thing. This is something where, there's bias that can be built in based off the data. So this is something that we want to avoid. How do we do that? What kind of controls do we have in place that could we put in place to make sure this doesn't happen? There's a couple things. You can do bias testing. And there's actually a bias testing framework that you can use from Microsoft, and then ones from IBM about fairness, AI fairness 360. Another one is diverse training, data sourcing. You could introduce other bits of data, training data, into your model so that it's not leaning one way or another. And then another thing is human review of high impact decisions, such as hiring. Maybe the final decision for hiring goes to a person. I know that in EU, they have certain frameworks and regulations where you can use AI to help you to go through, sort through resumes, but the final decision has to be done by a human being. That's another thing that you can do to reduce the amount of bias. No, we're human beings. There's going to be bias no matter what, right? But we don't want our AI to inherit that beef, so to speak. All right. This is just, let me see if I got another one here. Yeah, okay, here we go. Extraction attacks. So we're going to talk a little bit. Let me see how much more we got. We don't have much more, guys. So we're going to talk about extraction attacks, and this is using models against itself. And then we'll talk about what kind of controls we can put in place. And we're almost done, and I'm going to open up the floor. I see people jumping in. I see Larry. How you doing, Larry? I see Professor Black Ops. I see NC Worker and some folks on TikTok. Thank you guys for joining. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be open to questions. So if you have questions or if you have a comment or something, jump in, chime in. I'll be reading those in a second. Okay, so let's go to model inversion. So what is it? Model inversion is a repeated API queries used to mathematically reconstruct features of training data. The attacker reverses the model's learned patterns to extract what it was trained on. They're trying to figure out what the model was trained on, right? And so this is something that's been done in the real world. So researchers reconstructed recognizable facial images from this is so crazy. A facial recognition model by querying it thousands of times with gradient-based optimization. This was so crazy, I had to research it, and I found a couple of instances where this is happening. and I wanted to know more about it. So they're going to query it over and over again to gather information from that model, from the training data, and then they can reconstruct faces based off of that. If you had a model that was doing facial recognition or something like that, that would be something you could use to reconstruct the faces using. Isn't that ridiculous? It's so crazy. Some sci-fi shit. So anyway, what could you do to protect against this? Differential privacy during training. So you're mixing in different information if somebody tried to do this, you could make it so that it's going to be much harder for them to reconstruct faces by doing differential privacy during training. Another thing is limit the precision of return probabilities. Because the way that they're doing it is they're using a whole nother model to reconstruct these faces. So if you make it so that you're not giving them exactly, you're not returning the exact stuff that they want, especially if it's this kind of query, that might be something that can thwart them. Another one is, I think I go to membership inference, because these two I confuse a bit myself. So I want to put these right up next to each other so we can figure out what are the differences between the two. And I imagine this might be one that they'll throw at you to try to confuse you. Membership inference. So this is a statistical attack to determine whether a specific data point was in the data set. So a model responds with a higher confidence for data it was trained on. An attacker exploits this gap. Once again, they're using another model to figure out if you have certain data. But rather than going after reconstructing the information, they might already have a training model, a set of data that they want to see if this set of data that they have, how much of it is in your data set. So they're going after a whole data set, where the other one is going after reconstructing features in the data, training data. So it's two different things, but a way to protect against this one, membership inference, is to limit the confidence score precision, because that's how they're attacking it. So they're using their information and they're only really looking at the confidence score. They're going to feed in some data and see what is the confidence level that this is in that other database. And if it's a high confidence level, then they know that's in the training set. So what we can do is limit the confidence score precision. These two for me are a little bit harder because they're so nebulous. I haven't seen these in the real world as much. So model inversion and membership inference, I just have no solid understanding of these things. I can't point to this thing and say, hey, this thing happened. So these ones are a little bit more difficult. But the way I understand them is model inversion is reconstruction of a feature in the training set, and then membership inference is figuring out if certain data points are in the training set. Those are my keywords that I use. So model theft, this one is a lot more concrete for me personally, because this actually is happening in real time right now, currently. So a couple of the Chinese models stole their brilliant plan, by the way. I'm not taking anything from it. It is what it is at this point. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, which one was it? There's a couple of them where they stole the model from Claude or from OpenAI or from some of both to build the structure. DeepSeek was one of them for sure. And originally, not taking anything away from DeepSeek. DeepSeek is actually brilliant the way they did it, but they did start off by stealing some of the weights from, I think, OpenAI is who they stole it from originally. So model theft, what is it? It's querying a model's API systematically to collect input-output pairs, then training a shadow model that replicates the target's behaviors without authorization. So what they're doing is they take their model and then they use that model to query the model that they're attacking or they're going to steal from. And then their use it is brilliant. So what they do is they keep asking questions, and then their shadow model, it is going to copy their answers. The question and answer for each one of those hundreds of thousands of queries, and then it starts to reconstruct how it will respond. So you take a blank model and then they train it based off of mirroring and copying all the responses until that shadow model looks a lot like this other model. And which is why originally DeepSeek, when you would ask it a question about who are you, you can do this with any model. say, who are you? What model are you? It would say, I'm OpenAI. I'm OpenAI's ChatGPT or whatever. And I believe you can still do it with some of the ones that are out, still open source out there. The ones that they end up taking the open source model and then making money off of it. Anyway, how do you defend against this? What can you do? Input quotas, daily limits, making it so that you can't do it hundreds of thousands of times in a certain period. So I understand, like, you use Claude from Anthropic, you actually have a daily limit and you have an hourly limit on how many transactions queries you can do. And this is one of the reasons why, is because stuff like this, people steal in their model. Another one is API query pattern monitoring. Another one is a watermark the model outputs, so that this is the reason why if you ask it, some of the older models of DeepSeek, if you ask it, who are you, it will respond with, I'm ChatGPT. I was made by OpenAI or whatever. Interesting. So another one is a weakness is sensitive information disclosure. This is another one that we're dealing with right now in real life. So what is it? A model directly reveals confidential information from its training data or context window when queried in a certain way. So you can use a prompt to extract PII information. This is something that we're like thinking about, like, how can we make it so that you can't extract sensitive or private information from this thing? And there's a real world example of this. You don't want to put sensitive information into things like ChatGPT, like the open ChatGPT or the open cloud-based Claude, because I'll give you a specific reason. One was that Samsung in 2023, I don't know if you guys remember this one. I know I've used this on my channel a couple times, but Samsung engineers, they were allowed, their executives up at the top allowed them to use ChatGPT because it was incredible. 2023, you could use it to do all kinds of research and everything. And so Samsung let them, their top engineers, help them to solve these problems. But unfortunately, that code, the part of the code that they were uploading into ChatGPT was sensitive information. Samsung, I don't know if you, but Samsung is no joke. Samsung's competing directly with Apple, one of the richest companies on planet Earth. Samsung is a Korean company that's competing directly with China, directly with Japan's best technology. Samsung is no joke on several levels. And I believe the code that they put in had to do with their storage, because they've got some real innovative stuff at the time for storage. They put it into ChatGPT, and unfortunately, OpenAI's terms of service allow them to use your inputs to train their model. So now they're going to use your proprietary information to continue to train their model, and now they subsequently know your best secrets, right? Or your PII or whatever you're using. So you got to be really careful with, I don't recommend you use, especially if you have very sensitive information, you should not upload that stuff directly into the cloud, because it's a company you're uploading. Now you're giving your information to another company and they can do with it what they will. And in the terms of service, it says, hey, we're going to train on your data. If you use our stuff, we're going to train on your data. If you're okay with that, then go ahead. There's ways around that. And a couple here have to do with having what's called a DLP policy on your AI. That means data loss prevention. Like, data is not allowed to leave the premises of your organization. That would make it so you can't use certain AI models that are in the cloud. There are alternatives. You can use what's called a small language model, where it's on your local system, and it doesn't go into the cloud, right? And in that way, you can actually use Chinese models by downloading them directly on your computer and not allowing them to go outside of your network. They only stay on your system, and then there's no way the data is going to go out. So that's one of the things you can do. Or you can use ChatGPT, or they have instances where you can download them or gate it where the data is not allowed to go outside of your network. So there are different things you can do. And it mentions here premises, a small language model for sensitive information, output filtering for PII credentials, prohibit training on sensitive information. Now, another one would be to train people who are using it. If you tell people in your organization, you guys are allowed to use this, make sure that there's training to let them know, hey, just like a regular browser, you can use Google, right? You can't put sensitive information into Google. You're not supposed to sensitive information into Google and start messing around with it. Just like you can't, and similarly, you can't use that AI to put sensitive information in there. All right, let's keep going, guys. Beat that one into the floor. And we don't have many after this. I think we have, this is our last one, last couple slides. All right, so I'm going to make this quick. I'm going to stick straight to, make this concise and stick to the stuff we really need to know. One of the main features of cybersecurity is the protection of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you understand those concepts, other questions about this, you can figure them out on your own. It becomes common sense if you really understand protection of confidentiality, secret information, private information, sensitive information, integrity, making sure the data is what it looks like on its way to from point A to point B, it looks the same and nobody's tampered with it. And availability, making sure it's available to people without being disturbed or interrupted. You understand those three concepts, everything else will make sense. And we've already talked about confidentiality and making sure that there's encryption and data at rest, data in use, and data in transit, right? We already talked about confidentiality. Now let's talk a little bit about integrity and availability. How do we protect AI models in this way? There's a couple. Let's look at the attacks. So one is called an output integrity attack. So this is a man-in-the-middle attack on an outbound channel where the model produces the correct results, but the pipeline between the model and the customer, the consumer, is compromised. So this one we talked about extensively, but how do we protect against this one? Cryptography is one way, cryptographic signing of output at inference. So we've signed the data. So if anybody tampers with that information, it will corrupt it. It won't go through. Another one is TLS on the output pipeline. Another one is immutable output logging, meaning they can't go through, it's logging everything that's happening and nobody can go through and delete it or remove it. So it's there permanently. So you can always come back and see who messed with what and when. So those are a few different ways that we can protect the output integrity from an output integrity attack. So another one is model skewing. This is an attack where there's a gradual corruption of the model's behavior through manipulation of its feedback with continuous learning loops. So somebody's going in there and trying to manipulate the data by telling it different things. So what can we do with this? We can freeze production and model retraining so that it's only training on verified data. And it can't just train off any random set of data. It has to train off of certain amounts of types of data that's gone through and been vetted. Anomalous detection is another thing we're going to do. We're going to look at we might want to log every single one of the person, of anybody actually putting queries in. And then we're looking for anomalous detection, like weird things that they're saying or doing or interacting with the model, so that we can make sure that people aren't trying to corrupt the system. So another one is another weakness is model denial of service attack. This is where an attacker will flood the model so that nobody can use it, or it's limited use because they're flooding the model with all kinds of nonsense. And so this is what they'll do is flood the inference API with excessive, expensive request to deny service from anybody else, and then rack up a huge bill. Now, this is a real thing that happened. Check this out. The attacker an attacker discovered a public API AI writing assistant had no rate limits. So they know that it has no rate limits, right? And then they sent a 40,000 parallel request. So prompt after prompt, 40,000 prompts that triggered a maximum length response. And then the service was unavailable for 6 hours and the bill was $94,000. So how do you protect against this? Rate limiting, token limiting, input quotas, cost monitoring with automated alerts, CAPTCHAs built in to there's a ton of different things you can do for this. And you've got to put this stuff in place, especially for publicly facing AI. Okay, so another weakness, we're almost through these. There's a couple really important ones. Excessive agency and insecure plugin design and over reliance. And we'll cover these real quick. Excessive agency means that AI agents, like I know you've been hearing a lot about AI agents, about how an LLM, you can use an LLM to go through and perform actions, right? So that said, you don't want to make it overly permissive. So an AI agent given too many permissions or too many broad scope acts beyond intended purpose, that is really bad because it can be subject to injection attacks. It can have all kinds of mistakes and all types of things can happen with this. Case in point, so a study by Microsoft 365 Copilot in 2024, researchers demonstrated indirect injection via malicious email caused a Copilot to forward all user emails to external attackers' address, and the root cause was unrestricted send permissions and no scope limit. So they didn't put restrictions on the agent that they put out there, right? And then they were able to exploit it by having it send out, because the send wasn't restricted, so it could just send out a whole bunch of emails. So what do we do? How can we protect against this? Principle of least privilege. Now, this is a common thing. If you're a cybersecurity person, you have definitely heard this before. The principle of least privilege means you only give people privileges that they need to do their job, and nothing more and nothing less. If you have a financial AI, you're not going to give that financial AI permissions to mess around with operations. If you have an operational AI, it's not going to be able to tamper with finances or touch any part of that. So it only has privileges that it needs to do its job, and even that is restricted so it can do its job. Okay, let me see what's going on with TikTok. Let me fix that real quick, and we are back. Okay. Human in the loop is another one. If you have high impact actions like payments, like you have to send out payments every first Tuesday of the month or whatever, you might have to have that go through a human. Yeah, the AI is doing stuff in the background, but the final decision goes to a human being that says, okay, yep, this is good. I've read through all of this list. Let's go ahead and do that and read through it thoroughly. That's their whole job, is to go through and approve these things and look through every single one of the transactions that are above $10,000 or whatever dollars. Okay. Another one is insecure plugin design. What is this? So this is where an AI plugin tool, it lacks proper input validation, authentication, and scope controls. And this leads to all kinds of problems where it's subject to injection attacks, and it can be used to allow overly permissive things to users who are coming in. There's all types of stuff that you can do when you have an AI put into a plugin. And unfortunately, this is what's happened in real time with OpenClaw. This is what's happening with OpenClaw, where different parts and pieces have either excessive privileges to the agent, or they created a plugin, an AI plugin that has poor input validation, poor authentication, poor scope. This is what's happening with vibe coding too. People are making these AI variants or these tools that use AI, but they're not thinking it through properly. They're not looking at the security features of it. They just want it to work. And then there's all these bugs in it. So what can you do? Treat the plugin input as untrusted. Do not trust and do not verify. Don't trust nothing. Make sure that all the data is validated before it goes in, including people putting stuff in there. Minimize the scope of permissions for the plugin itself. And I would say another thing that's not here is scanning. Make sure once your code is done, you do a final scan or even continuous scanning like the big boys do. That's what they do. They're continuously scanning and looking for vulnerabilities always. And then finally, final one here is over-reliance, and I'm going to open it up. So what is this? This one right here, I think, is going to become more and more huge, because as more people come on board and realize how incredible AI is, they're going to rely on it more and more. So this is actually not an attack by an adversary. It's a failure where humans trust AI output without appropriate verification. I am definitely, this one right here has hit me a couple times. It's so good that you don't look at the output, but you always have to look at the output, especially if you're in the medical, legal, security space. You always have to look at the output. So what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen or reliance on this? Now, oh, let me give you a case of where this actually happened. In 2024, and actually this is happening this year, all the way up until now, lawyers are submitting legal briefs. And in this one case in 2024, a lawyer submitted a legal brief written by ChatGPT that cited 6 non-existent. It hallucinated a couple court cases. And then the AI, they sound plausible. They sound like it's could something to happen, but the judge caught it. And now they face sanctions for failing to verify that. So this happens. What can you do? Have a human in the loop to review high stakes decisions like the court decision. That's a huge one. Like paying bills, like anything with financial or medical or legal. This stuff really should not just be rubber stamped. You have to look at everything. The AI is not perfect. As much as cool as it is, it does make mistakes. So we have to be very mindful of those things. All right, guys, that's it for this one. On the next one, I'm going to stay on here and answer some questions. But for the SecAI Plus portion, we're done. I'm going to cover more on Domain 3 next week. Yeah, next week. I'll let you guys know if it changes. But next week is going to be Domain 3. We're going to start on that one. Domain 3 and 4 don't have as many as Domain 2. I think there's Domain 3 has 30%, if I'm not mistaken. So that one won't be as long as Domain 2, which had 40%. All right, guys, let me see. I've got some questions here and stuff. So I'm going to take some of these. My man, Larry. Larry, again, it's good to see you back, man. I missed you, man. What's going on, everyone? Been a while. Yeah, all is well, man. All is well. Let me see if I got anybody on TikTok here. Who had to pay for the $97,000 bill? The users or the dev? I'd have to go back and look. That's a good question. I believe it was the developer. That's happened quite a few times also with cloud, because cloud has the same kind of paying model where you're paying by the minute or by the transaction. So yeah, it's real bad stories about people on $90,000 to AWS or whatever. It happens. It's not pretty. So that's why you got to be mindful of how much usage, track your usage. That's one of the first things I do whenever I'm doing labs for AI or cloud is I'll track my usage. I'll find a way to have a real-time tracker of how much I'm using and cap how much I'm using, or have it, okay, as soon as it hits $20, send me a notification to tell me, because I don't want to go over my budget or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things that you have to do regularly. All right, my man. Oh, this is a new person. Hey, how you doing? Can we get that PowerPoint? Yeah, actually, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. So what I'm going to do with this PowerPoint, if you guys didn't know, this is going to be a whole course. This is right now currently free. I don't know how long I'm going to keep this, but it's on YouTube. If you go to ConvoCourses.com, you go to YouTube, you can find this whole course. I'm chopping it up into pieces and releasing them out, and I'm putting it on Substack. And I'm putting it on my own site called login.convocourses.com. And that is where I'm going to put all of these slides, downloadable slides. They'll all be there because I can't upload these onto YouTube, right? So these slides will be there. So just if you're interested in this stuff, I'm going to go deeper into this. I happen to be in this field right now. That's why I'm doing this, so I can learn more for my own purposes, but also I want to share it with my community so we can all rise together. That's the whole reason that I'm doing this whole thing. Professor Black Ops. You guys didn't know, my man, Professor Black Ops, one of the main guys that got me into cloud, finally pulled me into cloud, kicking and screaming. But he talks about, on his channel, goes deep into AI, goes deep into cloud stuff. And if you like GPT stuff, if you like AWS, if you like GRC stuff, that's the guy to talk to right there. So it's at Professor Black Ops. Just go ahead and check him out on YouTube. NC Worker, man, long time no see. FedRAMP Conmon. Yeah, I've noticed AI is getting integrated into some FedRAMP stuff. Very interesting way that this turning out in the FedGov side. where they're starting to integrate the some of the stuff from it. Cloud is already there, right? FedRAMP, that's what FedRAMP is all about, Gov Cloud. But now it's starting to integrate some of these other features such as AI in there as well. And that's some of the stuff that I'm doing right now at my actual job. Real interesting. I'm learning quite a bit. I'm very lucky to have gotten into it. And now I've got a platform where I can share that stuff out that I'm learning. So TikTok says before that, build a framework to track lineage. And I'm completely out of the context on this one. Before that, build. Oh, she's talking about AI. Oh, that's very interesting. I would like to know more about that, Gigi. Gigi's saying to build. I think what she means is like when you're developing an AI, you build a framework to track the lineage of the data. If that's what you mean, I think that's what she means. I'd love to hear more. I like where you're going with that train of thought. And then user 8105 says the PPSM, Porch Protocols and Services Matrix, will be very interesting for AI distributed systems. I got some federal people on here. They're saying stuff that I don't normally hear outside of the federal government. Love it. It is not much different than what we're doing right now, to be honest with you. A lot of things, it's really not that much different. The PPSM, the same things that you would do for a cloud system or for an on-prem system, you do with an AI system, because if there's ports, protocols, and services that need to be tracked, you're going to track them, whether they're used by AI or agentic AI or whatever. So it's really, there's some things that are completely different. Like one of the things is once you use an agentic system, the sources where it pulls from is interesting. That is interesting, especially if you have different pools of data with different levels of classification. That gets complicated real fast. And if the data is labeled, like how do you deal with that? If you want to manipulate some information, like where you're pulling from is interesting. Like the permissions get crazy with it. That gets crazy. But PPSM, it's not really. It's pretty straightforward from what I've been seeing so far. Larry says, I see many similarities in these domains and many common cybersecurity principles. Yep, exactly. Has there been any pushback to applying these domains due to hindrance of max use functionality of AI models? It is, to piggyback on what you just said, is exactly, much of it is, there's so much overlap that it's the same stuff. Like it's like I said, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability still applies. The PPSM, Porch Protocols and Services, like documenting all that, tracking all that stuff, still applies. Auditing, AU controls, like in NIST 800 AU controls, that stuff still applies. And you say, has there been any pushback to applying any of these domains due to the hindrance of max use? I will say this, like, because it can do so much, we want to be careful about what it has access to is really important. And that's been like one of the biggest challenges that we faced. Like, we have a large environment, without saying too much, get my fucking ass fired. We have a large environment, and then there's an AI, and then that AI has access to certain pieces of that. But there's certain areas that we're like, okay, we don't know if we want it to have access to this right here. And then if we want to have access to this, but what can it do with that information? If it does anything with it, does that change the classification of it? So there's some different things that are kind of coming up that we have to be careful about how we approach it in a way that doesn't change our security posture of our organization, right? It's supposed to enhance what we're doing and not downgrade the current security posture we have. So we're just taking it one step at a time. And there's definitely some challenges to this, to where we're all having to put our heads together and say, okay, what can we do with this? Now, we don't want this to happen over here. We don't want it to have access to this. We have to really put our heads together and figure, and we have to turn down the volume, so to speak, of what functionalities are allowed, because we don't want certain things that it can do. We don't want it to jeopardize what we have going on. We don't want it to change our security posture. So there's only certain features. We can't use all features, right? There's certain features we got to turn them off because it's not right in our environment. We have sensitive information that's not, we really can't use it. And then another thing, what's really smart about how the implementation is going is that we segment it. So it's segmented in that you can use AI here in a certain way that you can't use it over here. And it's like a learning process that we're trying to figure out, right? But we have it. It's there. Thanks for continuing to share your big knowledge. Not a problem at all. It's helpful for me too. I'm learning as I go. This stuff is pretty new for me. I've been diving in pretty heavily every single day. I've been hitting it hard, so I'm learning quite a bit. What do you think about departments with Department of War 12 months paid training? I did hear something about this. So Department of War, let me see if I can bring it up. So Department of War had something, DOW. I wonder if they're going to stick with that name. 12 months of paid training. And a couple of organizations are doing this kind of thing where they're going super hard on it. Yeah, okay. Here it is right here. Let's just go ahead and take a look at it together. It's an apprenticeship program. So here it is right here. This is on the actual official Department of War CIO site, war.gov. Oh my God, these guys are so corny, man. Sorry. Department of War launches cyber apprentice program to accelerate skills based on hiring for future ready workforce and bolster national security. I think stuff like this, regardless of the administration, I think this is great because we really have a gap in cybersecurity. There's a gigantic gap, and Professor Black Ops talked about this, and I can 100% agree with what he says about this. We have a huge skills gap where we're not getting enough young people in, and there's this. I don't know what's going on, guys, because it's been going on way before. It's not political, right? This is apolitical. Cybersecurity really has a hard time pulling in professionals, and I think it's because there's like this. When you come into cybersecurity, people are expecting a lot. They're expecting a degree, they're expecting certifications, they're expecting like fucking 7 years of experience, like all these things combined, like unrealistic things, especially in this day and age. What's going on here? Stuff like this, where it's going to accelerate skills, like you can come in as an apprentice and learn on the job training, and they're going to train you to how to do this. Only protects the infrastructure of the United States of America. It only protects us to get people who are smart in this country and retain that knowledge and then grow them. And with maybe if you want them to have a certification or a degree or certificate or whatever, you just train them in. You bring them in, give them a paid wage, train them like hands-on, and then, okay, now we're going to send you to this boot camp. Now we're going to send you to this school. Now we're going to send you to GWC or whatever, GWU, whatever. So I think this is great. I think stuff like this, even when the other previous administrations do it, this one, I don't care. This right here is what we actually need, because we just don't have enough people doing this work. We really don't. I'm telling you, like in the last 20 years I've been doing this, almost every single place I go to don't have enough people to do this work. I'm doing the work of 10 people. I'm not exaggerating. I'm doing the work of an entire office of people. If I told you the sizes of the network I'm working on by myself, you would be like, what? It's ridiculous. We need more people for sure. So if they could open up their doors and have more people come in, that would be incredible, right? Without having to put boots on the ground in another country, or because everybody's not built for that. You don't have to. I don't think everybody should have to go to freaking war to go. There's some smart people who are going to be better IT guys, and they're going to be grunts on war fronts, right? Jumping out of planes and shit. We need smart people to do this work. And that's why, for me, I saw a gap doing what I'm doing. Like, man, we need more people. Many years ago, I started a blog where I started telling people how to get in this field and what to do. And it's not, you don't have to be super technical. You don't have to be a genius. I mean, high school dropout, guys. I'm doing well for myself now, but it wasn't always like this. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, we need more people to do this work. And this is not enough, especially Americans that even are interested in it. To be honest with you, a lot of the places I go to, most generation Americans are not in these positions. It's mostly people who are like been here one generation, 2 generations. It's mostly other folks that are doing these positions. And I don't know what's going on with the American mindset, but we don't have a lot of engineers, and we don't have a lot of, the brain drain is real. I don't know where that's coming from, but we just don't have enough people doing this at all. I would take anybody from any country, to be honest with you. It's bad. I don't know what to say, man. It's been 20 years and it's been the same. So any kind of things like this that they have, where it's an apprenticeship, bringing people on and getting people paid and stuff like that, I'm all for it. We should have done this 10 years ago, to be honest with you. But we have, it's the equivalent of crumbling infrastructure where we're just not putting enough money in our own people. And I don't know what's happened. I don't know what's going on. But until we turn this around, we're screwed. We're screwed, man. Because at some point, old heads like myself and others are out of here. We're not going to be doing this forever. We have to start training up the new people to come in and take this. And it's not all just war stuff. It's financial stuff, and it's healthcare, and it's the whole infrastructure that does. That's what the federal government is supposed to be doing, is maintaining this whole thing. So it's not just warfare and intelligence. It's the FDA, it's the all kinds of different branches, EPA, and all this stuff. Next question: will CompTIA AI actually hold weight to get a job? So I originally did, I think it will, but let me just kind of put context on this. I did this because I was in between jobs a couple months ago, right? A few months ago, I was in between a job. I just got this recent job that I have. And during the interview process, everybody kept asking me, every interview, like I had 4 or 5 interviews, and everyone asked about AI. And I realized, okay, we're having a cloud moment, because this happened to me 10 years ago with cloud, like another maybe 5 to 10 years. Like I've had interviews in between jobs, and every time they were like, cloud, do you know this? Do you know this about cloud? Do you know that about cloud? And every time I'm like, what the hell's going on? The market shifted. More people start using, more organizations start using cloud, right? And I was late to the game. At AI this time, I'm like, I'm not gonna be late to this one. I'm all in. I'm 100% in. I'm gonna learn everything I can, and that's what I've been doing. So my last interviews, they kept asking about, what do I know about AI? Like, what's my experience with it? All that, because, and then they would, when I got closer into the interview process, but this is the reason why we're asking, because we're actually integrating it at this time, blah blah blah. And that wasn't just one interview, guys. It was many. So it's not going to go away. It's happening right now in real time. It's happening very fast and an accelerated rate. It's crazy. Do I think this certification is going to have an impact? I think it will. And the reason why is because CompTIA, there's a couple of different bodies of IT that do this well. They really know how to do it. And CompTIA is one of them. I'd say IC Squared, ISACA, and CompTIA, those 3. And then another one would be probably, who are those guys? There's a few other ones, but those are the top 3. They're really good at marketing, which you would think is like, why is that important? It's important because if nobody knows about it, no matter how good a certification is, nobody knows about it, nobody's going to care about it. They're good at marketing it, and they're, more importantly, they're very good at curriculum. That 1-2 punch makes it so that they normally get not just notoriety on a certification, but they get it market penetration where people in the HR departments and executives, hiring executives, know what the name of the certification is. Now, this one just came out. And let me tell you something. I took it and it was very well done. And I was like, that's it. This is exactly what I need. And I'm doing this job and it's hitting all the beats. It's everything that I'm talking to you guys about during this thing. We're having to deal with some of these things. So they nailed it, man. I got to say, they freaking nailed it. And the only thing where I can go from here would be like a vendor level certification. I'd have to go a vendor level certification, or I think ISACA has some really good ones. Maybe I could go that direction if I wanted to keep going. Security expert, I think he has one of those, or he's going for one that has a higher level. But yeah, I think it's well done. I think that the way they market stuff out there is good. They're in real good with the federal government, so they'll probably get on that list. It's good. And even if it doesn't blow up, I'm learning so much that I'm able to use it in my actual job. So yes, I think it's worth your time. I think it will hold. It will, I believe, and not yet. It's only been 2 months, but I think it will be able to land you a job. Especially if you know the stuff off the top of your head and you're asking you questions and you're able to rattle off some kind of weaknesses and what the controls are for those weaknesses, things like that. Thomas Wilson said, did you build your own local AI to help you gain experience in training on it and securing it? Yes, I did. So that was one of the first things I did. So this right here, everything I tell you guys to do, I do it. So the first thing I did when AI first came out is I started building my own AI. I started vibe coding and messing around with it. And I started seeing like weaknesses and figuring out what I can do with it. And I would like to show you guys some of my projects, but I need to secure my projects before I go showing them out to everybody. A couple I've showed out to like people that are on my, if you're on login.convocourses.com, a couple times I've shared them out with people, some of the stuff I've been doing, and I've got big plans for it. But the thing is, it was for me to learn. It was for myself. And by doing that, it exposed me to things like CI/CD pipelines on AI. It exposed me to things like the use of integrating an AI platform with a database backend and a cloud front end. I was able to figure out, see all that stuff and work on it. And then in the interviews, I was able to speak on it. And they were impressed every time. Every time they were impressed and asked me about the projects I was doing. And here's another thing I'm doing. This right here is one I built right here. This one right here. This right here is an AI. I built this whole thing from scratch and then put AI on it. And I've been using it, and it's freaking amazing. And I've not talked about it. I've made new videos about it because I'm still learning. I don't even know how to articulate what I'm learning yet. It's so fresh for me, but I'm having a great time. I'm learning quite a bit. Yes, to answer your question, that's exactly, I built my own stuff. And then, and shout out to Rob Rodriguez. Like he was telling me about him making his own AI. And I was like, damn, I've been thinking about it. If you go back about 1.5 years ago, where me and Rob Rodriguez are talking, and he mentions how he did the same thing and was able to land a job doing the same thing. I just copied him from a conversation we had. And I was like, I'm going to do that. Start doing it. And then I'll start learning it. Way better than any certification or degree you can get is actual hands-on experience. If you can, even if it's like Linux, like if you mess around with Linux, you install Linux and you make a server and you start putting patches and you're in the command line doing yum commands or whatever and securing it and all that stuff. And then you're able to go into an interview. You're able to put it on your resume, go in an interview and kill the interview when they ask you those questions about Python or whatever is your skill set. I'm not saying you have to know Python or anything. That's just an example. Whatever you're doing, if you do hands-on, experience is gonna outweigh a degree, a certification, or anything. There's nothing like experience. There's nothing that even comes close. So I would encourage you, if you really want to do this career field, get as much experience and hands-on as you can. And that right there is gonna, number one, it's gonna open your mind to what's really going on. Because the very first thing that happened to me when I did this right here is it made me realize, I had a huge realization that how good, I took the best AI I could and put it on this one, a local AI. I put the best one I could on there. And when I seen how limited it was compared to Claude and ChatGPT, I realized how crazy AI is, how much processing power it takes to get even easy responses, like even easy prompts that you put in there. I realized how powerful it really is. That was the first realization that it made me realize, okay, I think they're right, might be right about what stuff that Amade is saying, the CEO of Anthropic, the creators of Claude. He's saying that jobs are cooked, man. And the first time I realized it, that might be true, is when I did this right here. And I was like, I get it. I now understand. It just like a light bulb went off, and I was like, oh shit. But the way that I think is that it's not the end of the world. Like job loss is not the end of the world, guys. I just think we just need to shift gears. We just need to make our own products and services, and there's other ways to make money. So a career should be a part of that, right? It should be just like your degree is not going to instantly get you a job. Certification is not going to instantly get you a job. And hell, experience, even being the best thing, won't instantly, none of those things, but a combination of those things are going to help you. In that same way, financial security is not just a salary. You should think about ways you can use this to your advantage. I really think that you should. I think all of us should do that. Start thinking about that. I don't think all jobs are going to just, I still don't believe like all jobs are going to automatically disappear off the face of the earth, right? But is it going to have an impact? Yeah, it's gonna definitely have an impact for sure. It's going to shift how money is used. And the thing that I don't hear people talking about is if jobs are gone, like if your job is gone or limited, there's very less staffing because they're just hiring robots to do other stuff. What happens to capitalism? If people can't buy stuff, they can't afford to buy anything. What happens to it? I just don't hear a lot of people talking about that. I just don't think all of them are going to disappear out the face of the earth. I think it's going to take some time. But in that time frame, we have time to learn as much as possible, make our own other methods of money, other methods of making an income and a living. And fortunately, that's something I've been thinking about for a long time. I've already been doing this stuff. Not AI, but like business and making other streams of income and stuff like that. We got to find another way. And being an employee can be a part of that. I don't think you should just quit your job and do nothing but entrepreneurial stuff or anything. But you can supplement it with everything else that you have. And truly believe that's the way that things are going to have to be. We're going to have to supplement our income. Let me see here. Got more questions. Thank you for your explanation. I have Security Plus still, and is it worth taking the DOW program? Yeah, if you can get in, I think it's worth it, right? Regardless of what you think of the administration. If you can get in there, if you apply for it, right? It doesn't hurt anything to just go ahead and apply for it and ask, see if you can get in there and use that as leverage to move on to something better, bigger and better, and pays more money. Absolutely. Yeah, if you can get in there, do it. I'm taking my certificate. I'm taking my cyber security skill set and leaving the country. I'm taking my cybersecurity skill set and leave the country. Yeah, it's a big world, so there's lots of opportunities all over the planet. Stay positive. There's all kinds of that's the great thing about cybersecurity, is that there's ways I could work overseas. There's things I could be doing for that. Skill is transferable anywhere in the world. People need it. So that's another great thing about it that I found out by having the skill set, trying to think of other countries I could have worked for. I know Saudi Aramco is a big one. They pay really well. I got a call from contact from them every now and then. Every blue moon, I'll get a contact from them. They pay very well. And then another one was from a really good one contact me from like UAE, and nothing happened with that one, but that was exciting. Then you got companies from all over the world. Then you got international companies that are from Canada or from the US that you could live in another country and work for this international company. You've got so many different options once your skill set is tight. So it's definitely worth your time to look at it, look into it, because that skill set is good anywhere. I've been working from home for 10 years now, since 2014. Damn, it's a long ass time. 2014, that's over 10 years. Yeah, I've been working from home since 2014. Crazy to say that. Wild. Yeah, and a couple of those jobs, most of them I have to work within CONUS, within continental United States, most, because I work for the federal government. But some of them, there's been one or two out of all those jobs where I could have worked from anywhere. I could have worked from another country making crazy dough. The money we make here is so much bigger in some other countries. And I totally could have done that. And a couple times, if you look back to my old videos, I'm overseas and I'm working those jobs. So it is possible. Definitely possible, and something I also been looking into myself, just because the cost of living here. No other reason, right? I think that administration, they come and go. They're gonna, at some point, nobody lives forever. Let me just put it to you that way. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna say, you know what I'm saying, right? Nobody lives forever. At some point, it's gonna change. So the administration is like, comes and goes like the wind. But the affordability problem is real. That's been with us regardless of administration. So that's the one reason that I've been thinking of bouncing, or at least like I'll still do this, but like work somewhere else or something. Let me see. Do you think the SecAI Plus certification is worth it from CompTIA? Is worth it? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. Yes. The body of knowledge is really incredible. With AI taking over at the same time that college education is either too expensive for some, or viewed as unimportant by others, is it impossible, or is it possible? Man, I can't read. Is it possible to self-study AI to the level needed by employers? It depends on what kind of job you want to get. I would say I stick by my guns with experience being the top thing that you should focus on, but I'm not against degrees. I still think for most people, a degree is worth your time. If you have the time and money to do it, I would say do it, because it's gonna, if nothing else, it's gonna make you way more competitive in this very competitive field. In a time where it brings up a great question about, they're too expensive. People are saying they're not important. And then is it possible for you to self-study AI? It's absolutely possible for you to self-study for AI at a level that's high enough for employers, but it depends on where you're trying to get into. Because I'll tell you like this, I'm just going to be completely real with you. The federal government still is, some of the contracts are still looking for people with degrees, or a certain level of experience, like a certain number of years. You can supplement your years of experience to replace a degree. If you've been working 15 years and you're really good at routers, you have XYZ certification, and you have all this hands-on experience, they probably take that over a degree any day of the week. So if you happen to be new to this, I would still argue that a degree is going to help you. And that doesn't mean that you can't go do both. Like, get the experience, go work for some company. It's not going to be easy. I'm not saying it's easy. This is what I did. I was in the military and got a degree while I was active duty. That shit was, and I had a baby. Like, it was hella hard. And I did that for like 3 years. If I can do it, you can do it. So a degree, I think, still is going to put you above. Do you absolutely need it? No, I would say no, you don't absolutely need it. There's other sectors and industries that will take your experience and don't want to check a box that says you have a bachelor's degree. There definitely are a lot of, and I've actually been approached by a few, especially AI and software engineering. If you have the skills to do it, you could get in some of these places for sure. And cloud, I would argue cloud too. Like if you have a certain high level cloud certifications, I don't know about the federal government. Federal government's really a stickler for that checkbox of having a certain number of years and a degree in that certification. They like want all these check boxes, and it's really hard to get past those check boxes. But in other fields, like which fields one was a good one was that I've been contacted for was some IT service positions. There's been a couple IT service industries that they didn't care if I had a degree or not. They just say, hey, do you know this and this? Have you done this before? Another one has been some side projects. I've done a number of side projects where people contact me either off of LinkedIn or off this channel. They'll contact me directly and then they'll have a contract and say, look, Bruce, here's what we need done. Can you do these things? They're not saying, hey, Bruce, do you have this degree or that degree? No, I see what you've done online. Can you do this? We need help with this right here. I've had at least 4 or 5 of those, 4 or 5, and those guys paid really well. One of them paid me more per hour than I've ever made. So those didn't have a degree. So there are ways. I'm not saying it's impossible to get without a degree. I'm just saying you don't absolutely need a degree. I would still lean towards getting one if you have the time and money to do it. Then I would still get it for this field. We're not in a place yet. Unfortunately, in the U.S. federal government side, that checkbox is still really important. And then now that the job market is like these companies are kind of like narrowing the gap, it's becoming more competitive. And it's really sucks to say that. I think it should be more like based off of merit, not just a degree and a checkbox. It should be based off of, can you do this work? Period. It should be based off of that. Can you do this work? Period. I don't care if you have a degree. I don't care if you've been in this field for 15 years. Can you do this? And then show me that you can do it. That's what I think it should be, straight up merit. And I think if we did that, we'd retain way more talent. We wouldn't have such a gigantic brain drain. People avoiding doing this stuff because they didn't go to college or whatever. The U.S. has a real big problem with this, man, because it's making this huge gap between people who already have all these degrees and experience and stuff, and then people who can't even get in because it's too expensive. So that's a real big problem. For us to ignore it, it makes it worse. So to answer your question, it depends on I would say it depends on the sector. Can you get in with straight up experience, AI experience? You can, but it depends on the industry, I would say. Let me go over here to, I got some UK questions. Let me see. From Canada. Okay. It said, I'm in Canada I'm in UK. Sorry, I can't read. I'm in UK with a master's degree in cybersecurity technology with no job here. Okay. Let me see what else. It says a master's degree in cybersecurity technology in London, but I'm still not working. What I would do is number one, try to start your own business. I know that sounds crazy. Okay, don't shoot me. But I would try to start my own business. I would try to come up with some idea or business inside or outside IT, preferably inside IT, and try to start my own business. Something small to begin with. While you're gaining more hands-on experience. Another thing you can do, I'm just going to run some options by you, how my mind works and what I would do. I'm not telling you nothing I haven't done myself or attempted to do. So that's one thing, start a business. Another thing to do is look for international companies and be willing to move. That's a big one. I've done, like I said, I'm not telling you nothing I haven't done myself. So at one point I worked in Kuwait as a contractor. I worked a couple Middle East countries. I've had to move to another state, and the US is gigantic. So moving to another state is no joke. Let me just tell you, it's no joke. I moved from California to Colorado to get a job. And in the beginning of my career, I had less options, so I pretty much had to. It took me a long time to get to a remote position, a really long time to build to this. And to stay here, like, it's been an effort. So yeah, try to start a business, come up with some idea to start something that can make revenue. And now with AI to help you, or with different things you can build from scratch with minimal money, I would definitely, with your skill set in London, you're in UK with a cybersecurity technology degree. There's got to be something ideas you can come up with, a need for something. I'm telling you, like, just give it some thought. So that's one thing you do. Try to do international companies. That's another thing. Be willing to move outside of your comfort zone. It might be maybe it's not even outside of the country. It could be Ireland. It could be not too far away in Wales or something. Be willing to move, because you might have jobs. You might be able to find jobs in another part of UK. Those right there, we're going to open up a whole bunch of doors. Another thing I find with a lot of students, or people who are fresh into this and haven't got a lot of experience, but they got a degree and all this knowledge and stuff, is they don't have experience. By building your own business and messing around with the technology itself, hell, just forget about the business. Another thing is just focus on building things and getting experience and putting that on your resume that you have done. Show what you have done on your resume. That was a huge help in this last round of interviews I did. I built a few things. I noticed that every time I applied for a job, it was more effective if I had a resume that targeted that job, right? So what I did was I wrote my own app that would take my resume and write it to that job. I wasn't lying. It would just take their wording and focus on the things that they wanted in their requirements. That's all I would do. And then I had this app that would just do that for me. I had this app that would do that for me. I started using that app to apply for jobs. Sounds crazy now I'm saying it out loud. But then when I would go to the interview, I would get an interview and I would tell them about this app that I made. That's one of the apps I made. Another app I made was, I've been trying to make this thing where I can teach people what to do, what I do with risk management framework, to actually do it. So I have an app that I built that I've not released, or I haven't really talked about much, but it shows people how to do, not just read books, or not just, it's beyond that. It's a lab. I made it. And then I was telling the employers about how I did it. And because I put part of it on my resume, and then they were like, "Hey, you know this?" I was like, "Yeah." So then I going into this thing that I made, and they're like, it's like a light bulb would go off. And I'm telling you, experience, like, when you make things, it's different. It's different. So those are the things I would tell you to do. These things helped me, and I'm certain it will help you, especially you have a master's degree and you live in UK. That's got to account for something. You're so close to Europe. Some of the greatest positions and jobs out there are in EU. And I don't know how the job market is there, but here they maggot the hell out of these jobs, man. It's not going well, bro. It's rough out here in these streets. That's all I'm gonna say. It's $20 gas. They're on a tear, man. They're fixing everything. Oh man. Okay, I got some more here. What would you say to someone who is new in cybersecurity field? Okay, so it depends on where you're from. There's different new means different things to different people. There's brand new, like you don't know anything. You're fresh out of high school. You are coming from another field, from retail or whatever. There's different kinds of new. But what I would tell everyone is, if you're like all new people, is that hands-on experience right now is the best way to start. Getting hands-on. If you can build, there's many different ways to start. You can make your own apps. You can build your own, come up with some idea for a service and start creating that. That's going to teach you back-end databases and how to secure. You're going to have to think about, how do I secure that and all that kind of stuff. Building your own computers and networks and stuff in your house, like using your existing network. Start messing around with that. Get hands-on experience. That's the very first thing that you should start doing. Watch videos for the fundamentals, not necessarily my videos, stuff like this, but videos about IT as a whole, because you're not going to learn security unless you learn the fundamentals of information technology. Once you learn the fundamentals of information technology, certain light bulbs are going to turn on with protecting it. You'll just start to think, the more you understand it, the more you start to think about, okay, if this works like this, couldn't somebody just do X, Y, and Z to disrupt it? And the answer is yes, they could. And then you got to think, how do I fix that? How do I make it so that they can't? That's cybersecurity, protection of confidentiality, integrity, availability. So that's what I would say, hands-on first, because it's going to help you to understand if you even want to do this. Because I've noticed a lot of very new people are window shoppers. They don't really, I would say 80% don't even want to do this. They just think it's interesting and it's nice to listen to it or whatever. And it's something they consider, and then they hear how much money we make and they're like, and then they chicken out and bail. You know what I mean? They don't want to do, or they'll mess around with it for a second. And then as soon as they get confused about databases, they're like, nah, I don't want to do this. I'm going to go back to underwater basket weaving or whatever. 80% window shoppers. So I would say the very first thing you can do if you're new is figure out if you're a window shopper or if you're real, or if you're real with this, because it's not for the weak. This is not for the impatient. This is not for everybody. I'm telling you, it's not for everybody. But if you find yourself having the patience to deal with this technology, if you have yourself fascinated by what's going on and willing to do the work, you'll stick around and you'll start to learn. It just goes deeper and deeper. And then there's all these different pools that you can jump in. It's not just one thing. You'll start to see this vast landscape where you can be a network engineer, or you can do something completely. If you're a math whiz, you can do cryptography, and then that goes and has its own world and all kinds of things built on top of that. You have blockchain, stuff that I don't even talk about on this channel. You've got all these different avenues of things you can do. You have GRC, which is IT light. You don't even have to have hands-on for GRC. It's mostly policy and stuff like that. You don't have to be a tech whiz for that. I'm rarely hands-on with it. Or you want to go super hardcore and super deep, you can go into machine learning, AI security for machine learning, which gets very heavy. There's all these different avenues. You can, if you really love it, you can go very deep. Very first thing you should do, though, is get your feet wet and put your hands on a computer and start building things and figuring out if you really want to do this. Once you figure out you want to do this, there's many different avenues you can go. Many, and you'll see them right away. All right, let me see. There seems to be zillions of IT engineer positions open right now. They're out there. There's very competitive, and I would argue I don't think there's like a lack of jobs so much as they're very competitive, and you have to sacrifice something. Is what I'm realizing in a lot of cases. You might have to move. You might have to take a pay cut. You might have to, especially if you're new, like there's some sacrifice that has to be made if you really want it, but it's there. Is it there? Yeah, they're here. They do exist. Getting out of the military soon after doing offensive security, cyber for the past 2 years. Oh man, you're in a great place, Terrence. You're in a great place. Says, is AI career field the best and most lucrative path forward? I would say, think of it like this, Terrence. AI is a part of what we do. It's a tool within the toolbox. It's not the only thing you're going to do, especially in security. You're going to have to dip your toe into cloud stuff, into networking stuff, into all these different things. So you having that kind of offensive cyber under your belt is gold. I would go with that, to be honest with you. Your most powerful feature is going to be your background in offensive cyber, and along that way, on that path, there'll be tools that you can use that include AI. There'll be things you can use for AI. As a matter of fact, check this out. If you have an OSCP, I showed this last week. Offensive security, the guys who made Kali Linux, they have a new curriculum. You might want to do this before you get out of the military. They'll pay for it. They have, it's expensive as hell. They have a new curriculum. Let me show you my screen here, where they focus on AI. So this is offensive security. These are the guys who made the OSCP, the best hacking, ethical hacking certification you can get. Not cheap, as you can see. But they have something called OSAI. So red teaming is really big for AI. So if you want to go this route, this would be something you could do that somebody like myself, who's not really in this field, I'd have to take 10 different steps to get to this point. But it sounds like you're already there with your experience. You might want to consider something like this. Just putting it out there, some ideas for you. The pricing is high, but you're in the military, so they'll pay for this. Yeah, you can get this paid for before you get out. I'd recommend you do something like this, or if you don't have it already, the OSCP. This is a big one. OSCP is right up there with the CISSP. It's a very lucrative certification. They're going to pay the hell out of you for this. And I don't know why I'm not able to find it. Where is the certifications on their site? Okay, this is taking a little longer than I thought. These are the guys who made the OSCP, I believe. Okay, let's do like this. OSCP certification. Let me show you what I'm talking about real quick. I think you'll appreciate this. I think they have a separate site for, oh, is this it? Oh, okay, I guess this is it. Anyway, so yeah, I would recommend before you get out of the military getting cert like this. Not easy, not an easy cert, but they'll pay for it. And then once you have it, you can tell them how much money you want. Yeah, you probably tell them how much money you want, and they probably pay it. Somebody's gonna pay it because it's that certification is no joke. Get that before you get out, or CISSP. That'll help. I think people are running scared of the government positions right now due to the quick out of the blue layoffs and shutdowns. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, absolutely. I can't argue with that. Somebody asked me about it, so that's why I brought it up. Yeah, right now, oh Lord, I don't know what they're doing, guys. I've never seen anything like it. I've been working with the federal government for a long time. I gotta say, it's the most incompetent group of backwards people I've ever seen run from the top down in my life. Taking out people who know what they're doing. It's mind-blowing. And the fact that I got to think to myself, oh, should I say this, is ridiculous in the United States of America. It's ridiculous that I've got to check my own. I've got to think, oh, are they going to see this video? What the fuck is going on, man? I don't know what to say, man. I've never seen this happen before. It's unbelievable. It's shocking. It's not the country that I fought for and lost friends over. I don't know what they're doing, guys. It's unfortunate. Okay, somebody said, I have 25 years of experience in accounting and auditing, and now with a master's degree in cybersecurity tech. Man, this be a shoe-in. Think of this. Financial field has several gigantic firms that are international. I think it's your resume. Personally, I think it's probably your resume. You have 25 years of accounting and auditing, and you can't integrate that into your cybersecurity skill set. Integrate your cybersecurity skill set into your financial background. It's got to be your CV. It's got to be your CV. Let me see what I can do here. Let me see if I still have that app up. I don't know that I want to. Let's just try it. Let's just see. Let's see what we got here. I don't even know if it still works. I really haven't been messing with this thing. Okay, this is that resume tool that I told you about. So if you're still on from from UK, try this app right here. Take your resume. I don't need your personally identifiable information. I don't need your name. I don't need your image on there if you have it for your CV. I don't need your phone number, your location, none of that. All I need you to put in there is your content for your resume. Put it in there, and it's going to walk you through some skill gaps you need to put on your resume. Now, you got to read it. It's using AI, okay? So AI is not perfect. AI will hallucinate, all kinds of stuff. So you got to read through it, but it's going to give you some really good ideas of what to put on your resume. So if you still happen to be watching me, just use it. Try it out. I don't know much longer I'll have this thing up there because I got to pay for this thing. So yeah, put that in there. And then if you want to contact me, I could take a look at your resume. It's here, let me see here. I can't promise you anything, but it sounds like you have a slam dunk happening, but you have the ball in your hands, but you're not shooting. That's what it sounds like to me. Here, I'm going to give you my email address and I'll take a look. Make sure you go to that app and use it to improve your resume. I want you to send me your original resume and then the resume you get once you go through this. ConvoCourses.com. And just so I know it's you, just put like resume or something. And then I'll take a look. Okay, I'm almost done, guys. Let me just read one more question here. Okay, so Larry says, with experience being a strong part of what employees look at when they hire, has the average age of the worker in cyber and GRC gone up? Yes. Common theme seems to be it takes time to gain the experience needed. Yes. Yeah. I think this might be the main problem, Larry. Like, we can't get younger people in for this very reason. Cybersecurity, and I get it, like cybersecurity takes people who are experienced. Some of the things that I find myself in is, as a GRC person, is I'll be in a meeting with a senior level, a CIO or something, right? And you got to really know how to talk to those guys. And rather than get flustered, I'll be prepared. And then sometimes we're hit up with high level decision making. There's some decision making that shouldn't really be in my court, but I'm in the room and helping with those decisions. And that's not something like somebody who hasn't done this for a long time would really be able to do. But that said, what's to stop us from having an apprentice so I can teach that person what to say and do and why I'm talking the way I am? Like, why can't I have an apprentice where I can show that guy the ropes, a 20-year-old who just got out of their advanced cyber security kid, and then I just teach that guy everything step by step, what to do on everything, and then to show that person how to be. By the time they're halfway my age, they'll be 10 times better than what I could have done. Why can't we do something like that? It just doesn't make sense to me that we don't do something like that. I don't know. They just won't hire people, and then they'll rather just stack more work on top of us to do 10 times more work. I don't understand the thinking behind it. And now they're like, oh, AI is going to we'll be able to replace everybody with AIs. Nah, after using it, it's not perfect. It hallucinates. It's still, the assurance issue is real. It's not And now some of them will even lie. It even knows what it's saying is not the truth, and it'll actively say stuff that's not the truth. You want that running your bank? That's crazy. That's, I don't know. We're not there yet. I'm saying eventually it'll be there, but it's not there yet, man. We got a ways to go, y'all. It's not there yet. So I don't know why. What's this whole, I think they're letting people go because they're trying to buy more data centers, like the big guys are trying to buy more data centers. But and maybe the government has a different problem where you guys already know what that problem is. But because I'm telling you, they were on track to start hiring a massive amount of people. And then something changed, and you know what it is. And suddenly they started firing a bunch of people. Doge came in, start firing people for no real good reason, like some made up reason that don't make no sense. Like important people, guys, important people. I know because I was in there, and they let people go who they didn't know what the hell they're doing. They let people go who were highly skilled, and then replaced them with people who did not know what they're doing. Yes, men who don't know what they're doing. I hope we can get back to normal at some point, but I don't know. This is coming from somebody who wants us to win, but it seems like I don't want to be negative. So we'll get there. We'll get better. All right, guys. I think I'm out of here. It's been 2 hours. I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much for joining me, Professor Black Ops. Shout out Professor Black Ops. If you guys didn't know, now you know. That's the man with the plan. Larry, how you doing, man? It's good to see you again. Thanks for joining. And all you guys' questions, Terrence, and some of the other guys who ask me questions, that's what this whole thing is about. It's about a community. And if you guys are interested in learning more, this thing continues on login.convocourses.com. Go ahead and check us out. We're still growing. I'm still adding stuff on there. I got so many plans. I'm introducing free stuff on there. I'm beta testing some of these things that I'm doing in some way, shape, or form. So just join us there. And I am out of here. Talk to you guys later.